The wedding hall fell into a deathly silence as Darnell Pierce raised his champagne glass toward his ex-wife and laughed, a sound meant to cut. Look at her, everyone. Zariah Vale, still single, still hiding behind flower arrangements. Some women expire, and they don't even know it. The elite crowd shifted uncomfortably. Cameras turned. Zariah's hands trembled as she gripped the clipboard that suddenly felt like the only solid thing in the room. But what Darnell didn't know, what nobody in that Alabama mansion knew, was that the most dangerous man in the room was already watching, and he was done letting her stand alone. If you want to see how this story ends, stay with me until the final word. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Zariah Vale had learned to make herself invisible. Not physically. She was tall, black, graceful in the way that came from years of moving through spaces where she wasn't entirely welcome. But she had perfected the art of blending into the background of luxury events, of being essential without being noticed. It was a survival skill she'd honed after the divorce, after the public unraveling of her marriage to Darnell Pierce had turned her into a cautionary tale whispered about in Atlanta society circles. Tonight, she was the lead event stylist for the Ashford Chen wedding, a sprawling affair held at Bellamont Estate just outside Montgomery. The venue was a restored antebellum mansion that wealthy people paid obscene amounts of money to pretend had no ugly history. Zariah had spent 3 days transforming the grounds into something that looked like a fairy tale. If fairy tales cost $250,000 and required permits from the Historical Society. She stood near the edge of the reception hall, surveying her work with the critical eye of someone who knew that one drooping orchid could unravel an entire aesthetic. White silk draped from the vaulted ceiling. Candles flickered in hand-blown glass holders she'd sourced from a craftsman in North Carolina. The centerpieces were architectural, cascades of white roses, pale green hydrangeas, and branches she'd personally stripped and spray-painted gold. It was perfect. It had to be perfect, because perfection was the only armor she had left. Zariah. Michaela Chen, the bride's mother, appeared at her elbow with the kind of smile that meant a request was coming. The photographer wants to adjust the lighting near the cake table. Can you— Already done, Zariah said smoothly. I had Marcus shift the uplighting 20 minutes ago. The color temperature should photograph beautifully now. Michaela's smile warmed into something genuine. You're a miracle worker. Zariah returned the smile, the professional one that never quite reached her eyes. That's what you paid for. As Michaela glided away, Zariah allowed herself a single steadying breath. 4 more hours. She could hold herself together for 4 more hours. Then she'd go home to her small, quiet apartment in Birmingham, pour a glass of wine she'd pretend to enjoy, and try not to think about how her life had become a series of beautiful moments that belonged to other people. The ceremony had gone flawlessly. Bride radiant, groom teary-eyed in the genuine way that made guests reach for tissues. Vows exchanged under the ivy-covered arbor Zariah had spent 6 hours wiring into place. She'd stood in the back, watching couples hold hands, watching mothers dab at their eyes, watching love perform itself with the kind of confidence she no longer believed in. Now the reception was in full swing. A jazz quartet played near the bar. Waitstaff circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that cost more per bite than most people spent on lunch. Zariah moved through the crowd like a ghost, adjusting a tilted vase here, repositioning a candle there, her practiced invisibility keeping her safely separate from the guests. That was when she saw him. Darnell Pierce stood near the entrance to the ballroom, his hand resting possessively on the lower back of a woman Zariah didn't recognize. He looked exactly the same, 6'2", dark-skinned, handsome in the conventional way that had once made her pulse quicken. His suit was expensive, tailored to show off shoulders he maintained through a gym routine he'd always prioritized over time with her. His smile was bright and performative, the one he used when he wanted to be seen. Zariah's entire body went cold. She'd known there was a chance he'd be here. Darnell ran in the same circles as the Ashford family. Old money, new money, the kind of people who collected connections like some people collected art. But knowing there was a chance and seeing him were 2 entirely different experiences. Her first instinct was to leave. Just walk out, let her assistant handle the rest of the evening. But she'd worked too hard to build her reputation back up after the divorce. Leaving a high-profile event early would spark questions, rumors, the kind of attention she'd spent 2 years trying to avoid. So she stayed, and she prayed he wouldn't notice her. But Darnell Pierce had always had a talent for finding her when she least wanted to be found. She was adjusting the arrangement near the head table when she heard his voice behind her. Well, Zariah Vale. She closed her eyes for a half second, steadied herself, then turned with the polite, neutral expression she'd practiced in the mirror. Darnell. He looked her up and down with the kind of appraisal that made her skin crawl. His companion, young, light-skinned, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Zariah's car payment, stood beside him with an expression of vague curiosity. Still doing the flower thing, huh? Darnell's tone was light, conversational, but Zariah heard the edge underneath. She'd been married to him for 7 years. She knew every variation of his cruelty. Event styling, she corrected quietly. And yes, right. Event styling. He emphasized the words like they were a joke. I'm sure it keeps you busy. The woman beside him giggled. Zariah felt something sharp twist in her chest, but kept her face smooth. If you'll excuse me, I have work to... This is Brielle, Darnell interrupted, pulling the woman closer. My wife. The word landed like a slap. Zariah's eyes flicked to Brielle's left hand, where a diamond ring caught the light. Bigger than the one Darnell had given Zariah. Shinier. Congratulations, Zariah said. Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. Brielle smiled, the kind of smile that said she knew exactly what kind of victory this was. Thank you. We've been married 6 months now. 6 months. Which meant Darnell had moved on fast, faster than fast, which meant Zariah's brain did the math before she could stop it. Their divorce had been finalized 8 months ago, which meant Darnell had been with Brielle while they were still married, while Zariah had been trying to hold together a relationship that was already long dead. She should have known. She had known. But confirmation still burned. I should get back to work, Zariah said again, turning away. You know what I've always admired about you, Z? Darnell's voice stopped her. That nickname. He hadn't called her that in years. You're such a hard worker, always so dedicated, always putting the job first. She turned back slowly. Is there something you need, Darnell? His smile widened. I'm just making conversation. We can be civil, can't we? It's been 2 years. 1 year and 11 months, Zariah corrected before she could stop herself. Right. Almost 2. He took a sip of his champagne. You look good. Tired, but good. This kind of work must be exhausting. Brielle leaned into him. Baby, didn't you say she used to complain about working weekends? Oh, all the time. Darnell's voice was warm, confiding, as if they were all friends sharing fond memories. She was always so stressed, always pushing herself. I kept telling her she needed to slow down, enjoy life more, but some people just can't help themselves. Zariah's hands curled into fists at her sides. She forced them to relax. I need to check on the catering staff. Running away again? Darnell called after her. That's familiar. She didn't respond, didn't turn around, just walked toward the kitchen with measured steps, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her rush. The industrial kitchen was chaos. Line cooks shouting orders, waitstaff loading trays, the head chef barking instructions over the clatter of plates. Zariah slipped into a corner near the walk-in freezer, pressed her back against the cool stainless steel wall, and let herself shake. 3 minutes. She gave herself 3 minutes to feel everything. The humiliation, the anger, the old familiar ache of loving someone who treated her like she was disposable. Then she straightened her spine, smoothed down her black dress, and walked back into the reception. Darnell was holding court near the bar now, surrounded by a cluster of guests who were laughing at something he'd said. Brielle stood beside him, her hand on his arm, glowing with the confidence of a woman who thought she'd won. Zariah forced herself to look away, to focus on her work. She checked the timeline with her assistant, confirmed that the cake cutting was on schedule, made sure the DJ had the correct pronunciation for all the names in the toasts. She stayed busy, stayed moving, stayed invisible. But Darnell wasn't done with her. An hour later, she was near the dance floor when she heard the feedback squeal of a microphone being adjusted. She looked up to see Darnell standing near the DJ booth, mic in hand, swaying slightly. He was drunk. Not falling down drunk, but loose and confident in the way alcohol made mean people meaner. Hey everyone, he called out. The music lowered. Guests turned toward him with the polite attention people give to unexpected speeches. Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to take a moment to appreciate something. Zoraya's stomach dropped. I'm looking around this beautiful venue, Darnell continued, gesturing broadly, and I'm thinking about all the work that went into making tonight special. And I realized I know the woman who did all this. No, 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 no. Zoraya Vale. Where are you, Z? Heads turned, scanning the crowd. Zoraya considered pretending she wasn't there, but Michaela Chen was already pointing her out, smiling like this was a lovely moment of recognition. There she is, Darnell said, his voice warm and expansive. Come on up here, Z, don't be shy. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, but she was working. This was a client's wedding. Making a scene would destroy her professionally. So she walked toward him on legs that felt like water, her face carefully blank. Darnell handed her the microphone with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tell everyone about your work. You're so good at what you do. She took the mic with numb fingers. Thank you, but this night is about the happy couple. I'm just so humble, Darnell interrupted, taking the mic back. That's always been her way. Never wanting attention, never wanting to be celebrated. He turned to the crowd. We were married for 7 years, and the whole time she was like this. Always working, always busy, never making time for the relationship. The room went very quiet. The kind of quiet that meant everyone knew they were witnessing something they shouldn't be. Darnell, Zoraya said softly, please don't. I'm just being honest, he said, his voice taking on a wounded quality. I tried. I really did. But some women, they just don't know how to prioritize. They choose their careers over their marriages, over building a family. He gestured to Brielle. Thankfully, I found someone who understands what's important. Brielle beamed at him. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. A few pulled out their phones. Zoraya reached for the microphone. I think that's enough. Darnell pulled it away. You know what the saddest part is? She's still alone, still single, still working herself to death for other people's happiness. He looked directly at her. You're what, 38 now? 39? Women have an expiration date, Z, and I hate to say it, but you're past yours. The room erupted in a low murmur. Someone gasped. The bride's mother looked horrified. Zaria stood there, every word landing like a physical blow. Her face burned, her hands trembled. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, could see phones recording, could imagine the whispers already spreading. She should walk away, should leave with dignity, should refuse to engage. But something inside her, something that had been silent and small and carefully controlled for 2 years, finally cracked open. You want to talk about our marriage? Her voice came out steady, clear. Let's talk about it. Darnell's smile faltered slightly. Let's talk about how you were sleeping with your assistant while I was trying to save our relationship with therapy you refused to attend. Let's talk about how you blamed me for our infertility when you were the one who refused to get tested. Let's talk about how you convinced me I was crazy for thinking you were cheating when you'd already opened a joint bank account with her. The murmur grew louder. Brielle's face had gone pale. You want to talk about expiration dates? Zoraya continued. You're 43 years old and you married a 25-year-old because women your own age saw through your bullshit. You want to talk about priorities? You prioritized your ego over our marriage every single day. And you want to talk about being alone? She smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut. I'd rather be alone for the rest of my life than spend one more second pretending you were worth my time. Silence. Complete, total silence. Darnell's face had gone dark with rage. You bitter... I think we're done here, Zoraya said quietly. She turned to Michaela Chen. I apologize for this disruption. I'll be in the garden if you need anything. She walked out of the ballroom with her head high, refusing to rush, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. Behind her, she heard the music start up again, heard the forced resumption of conversation, heard her professional reputation crumbling in real time. The garden was dark and quiet. Zoraya found a bench hidden behind a wall of climbing roses and sat down heavily. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. She'd just committed professional suicide. No client would hire her after this. Word would spread. She'd be blacklisted. Everything she'd built in the 2 years since the divorce, gone. That was quite a performance. Zoria's head snapped up. A man stood at the edge of the garden path. Tall, Asian, probably Korean from his features, wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than some cars. His hair was dark and perfectly styled. His face was unreadable in the shadows. "I'm not in the mood for company," Zariah said roughly. "I gathered that." He stepped closer, into the light from the garden lanterns. His eyes were dark, sharp, assessing. "But I wanted to meet the woman who just eviscerated her ex-husband in front of Alabama's elite." "Then you've met me. Congratulations." He smiled slightly. "I'm Jun-ho." "I don't care." "You should." Something in his tone made her look up properly. He wasn't moving closer, wasn't invading her space, but there was something about his stillness that felt deliberate, controlled. "Why should I care who you are?" Zariah asked. "Because I'm about to make you an offer." "I'm not interested in—" "Go back inside," Jun-ho said quietly. "Hold your head up. Finish your work." Zariah laughed, and it came out bitter. "Did you miss the part where I just destroyed my career? I saw a woman refusing to be degraded." He tilted his head slightly. "But if you walk away now, you prove him right. You prove you're ashamed. Are you?" "I'm realistic." "You're afraid." The word hit harder than it should have. Zariah stood up abruptly. "You don't know anything about me. I know you built a business from nothing after a divorce that should have destroyed you. I know you're one of the most sought-after event stylists in 3 states. I know you just stood up to a man who spent 7 years making you believe you were small." He paused. "And I know you're about to let him win anyway." Zariah's throat felt tight. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing." Junho's expression didn't change. "I just hate watching capable people surrender." "I'm not surrendering. I'm being practical." "You're being a coward." The words should have made her angry. Instead, they settled somewhere deep in her chest where truth lived. Junho turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, your ex-husband is a small man pretending to be important. The people in that room know it. They were uncomfortable because they recognized cruelty, not because they agreed with him." He glanced back at her. "Go finish your job, Zariah Vale. Show them who you really are." He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the shadows of the garden path like he'd never been there at all. Zariah sat back down. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her breathing had evened out. She thought about what would happen if she left now. The whispers, the assumptions, the narrative Darnell would spin about how she couldn't handle confrontation, couldn't handle truth, couldn't handle being called out for her failures. Then she thought about every wedding she'd styled in the past 2 years, every bride she'd calmed down, every crisis she'd averted, every impossible deadline she'd met. She'd rebuilt herself from ash. She'd turned pain into purpose. She wasn't going to throw that away because one man wanted to remind her she'd once been broken. Zariah stood up, smoothed down her dress, and walked back into the reception. The room didn't fall silent when she entered, but she felt the weight of attention shift toward her. She ignored it, walked straight to her assistant and checked the timeline for the rest of the evening, confirmed the cake cutting was ready, made sure the sparklers for the send-off were properly positioned. She worked. She did her job. She refused to hide. And slowly, gradually, the energy in the room shifted. Guests stopped staring. Conversations resumed. The bride's mother approached her with an apologetic smile and a promise that Darnell had been asked to leave. "I'm so sorry," Michaela said quietly. "That was completely inappropriate." "It's not your fault," Zariah replied. "But thank you." 2 hours later, the wedding ended in a shower of sparklers and champagne toasts. The bride and groom drove off in a vintage car Zariah had arranged, trailing tin cans and white ribbons. Guests filtered out, still buzzing about the evening, though Zariah noticed that the buzz was less about Darnell's cruelty and more about her response to it. She was supervising the breakdown of the floral arrangements when someone tapped her shoulder. She turned to find a woman in her 50s, elegantly dressed, with sharp eyes and a notebook in her hand. "Zariah Vale?" the woman asked. "Yes?" "I'm Diane Rothman. I write for Southern Bride magazine." She offered a business card. "I've been following your work for a while, but after tonight, I'd like to do a feature on you, if you're interested." Zariah stared at the card. A feature? About rebuilding after public failure, about women who refuse to disappear when the world expects them to. Diane's smile was kind. "I think you have a story worth telling, on your terms this time." Zariah took the card with numb fingers. I'll think about it." "Please do." Diane squeezed her arm gently. What you did tonight took courage. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. After Diane left, Zariah stood in the empty ballroom, surrounded by the debris of other people's happiness. Her feet ached. Her face hurt from holding professional smiles. Her heart felt like it had been run through a grinder. But she was still standing. She was loading the last of her supplies into her van when she saw him again. Junho stood near the edge of the parking lot, leaning against a black Mercedes that probably cost more than her annual income. You came back, he said. It wasn't a question. You were right, Zariah admitted. I would have regretted leaving. I know. His certainty should have been arrogant. Instead, it just felt true. Why did you care? Zariah asked. You don't know me. Junho was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I know what it's like to be underestimated. I know what it's like when people assume you're broken because they saw you break once. He met her eyes. And I know that the most dangerous thing a person can do is stand back up when everyone expects them to stay down. Something in his words resonated deeper than they should have. Zariah found herself taking a step closer. Who are you? She asked quietly. Junho smiled, and it was the first real expression she'd seen from him. Someone who thinks you're far more interesting than you believe you are. Before she could respond, he opened his car door. I'll be seeing you, Zariah Vale. Will you? Yes. He drove away, leaving her standing in an empty parking lot with a business card from a journalist and a strange, unfamiliar feeling blooming in her chest. It felt dangerously close to hope. Zariah climbed into her van and started the drive back to Birmingham. Her phone buzzed with texts, her assistant checking in, her mother asking how the wedding went, a few colleagues who'd apparently heard what happened and wanted to make sure she was okay. She didn't answer any of them, just drove through the dark Alabama night, replaying the evening in her mind. Darnell's cruelty. Her response. The stranger in the garden who'd pushed her to be braver than she felt. The journalist who saw a story worth telling. By the time she pulled into her apartment complex, exhaustion had settled into her bones. She dragged herself upstairs, kicked off her heels, and collapsed onto her couch without bothering to change out of her dress. Her phone buzzed again. This time, an unknown number. The text was simple. You did well tonight. JK. Zariah stared at the message for a long time. She should delete it, should block the number, should maintain appropriate boundaries with a stranger who somehow had her contact information. Instead, she saved the number and typed back, Who says I needed your approval? The response came quickly. No one. But you have it anyway. Despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the emotional whiplash and the uncertainty of what came next, Zariah smiled. She fell asleep on her couch, with her phone in her hand and her professional armor finally, temporarily set aside. And for the first time in 2 years, she didn't dream about her marriage ending. She dreamed about what might come next. Zariah woke up with her neck cramped and her dress twisted around her body like a tourniquet. Sunlight cut through the blinds in her small Birmingham apartment, striping her face with harsh morning light. For a disorienting moment, she didn't remember where she was or why every muscle in her body ached. Then it all came rushing back. The wedding, Darnell, the public humiliation, her own voice, sharp and cutting, finally saying things she should have said years ago. She sat up slowly, wincing as her spine protested. Her phone had fallen onto the floor during the night. She picked it up and saw 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, and a notification that she'd been tagged in 6 social media posts. Her stomach turned over. She opened Instagram first because she was apparently a glutton for punishment. The first post was a short video clip someone had filmed during Darnell's speech. The caption read, Yikes. Imagine airing out your divorce at someone else's wedding. #tacky. #drama. #Montgomery wedding. The comments were worse. Some defended her. Most didn't. A few were gleefully vicious in the way only strangers on the internet could be. Zariah closed the app before she could read more. Her hands were shaking again. She forced herself to stand, to walk to the bathroom, to turn on the shower hot enough to hurt. She stood under the spray until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the residue of last night's confrontation. It didn't work. The shame clung to her skin like oil. By the time she got out, her phone was ringing. Her assistant, Marcus. She almost didn't answer. Then she remembered that Marcus had worked 3 other events with her this month and deserved better than radio silence. Hey, she said, her voice hoarse. Oh, thank God. Marcus sounded relieved. I've been trying to reach you all morning. Are you okay? Define okay. Fair point. She heard him moving around, probably pacing. Marcus paced when he was stressed. Listen, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. Zaria sat down on her bed, still wrapped in her towel. Just say it. 3 clients called this morning. 2 of them want to postpone their consultations. 1 canceled outright. The words landed exactly the way she'd known they would. Expected, but still devastating. Which one canceled? Her voice came out flat. The Hendricks anniversary party. That was a $15,000 contract. Gone. Okay, Zaria said. Okay, what reason did they give? Marcus hesitated. They said they wanted to go in a different direction. But Zaria, the video is everywhere. Someone posted it on TikTok and it's got like 200,000 views. They're making it into a thing. What kind of thing? Memes, commentary videos, there's a whole thread on Twitter debating whether you were in the right or if you should have kept it professional. He paused. For what it's worth, I think you were completely justified. That man is a piece of... I need to go, Zaria interrupted. I'll call you later. She hung up before he could respond. Then she made the mistake of opening Twitter. The thread was exactly as brutal as she'd imagined. People who'd never met her, never seen her work, weighing in on her character, her choices, her worth. Some of the comments were supportive. Most were just cruel for the sake of being cruel. One tweet had over 10,000 likes. Imagine being so bitter about your divorce that you blow up a wedding you're being paid to work at. This is why you stay humble, ladies. Zaria threw her phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. She didn't check to see if the screen had cracked. She sat there in her towel, dripping water onto her worn carpet, and felt the walls of her carefully rebuilt life closing in. The business she'd built from nothing was crumbling. Her reputation was being shredded by strangers. And worst of all, she couldn't even say Darnell was wrong. She had lost control. She had made a scene. She had let him get to her, just like he always did. Her phone buzzed from where it had landed. She considered ignoring it. But what if it was another client canceling? Better to know now than later. She retrieved the phone, screen intact miraculously, and saw a text from the unknown number. JK. The message read, "How are you holding up?" Zaria stared at it for a long moment. She should ignore it, should delete it, should not engage with a stranger who'd somehow inserted himself into her disaster of a life. Instead, she typed, "How did you get my number?" The response came quickly. "I asked Michaela Chen for it, told her I wanted to hire you for an event." That's a lie. Is it? Zaria found herself almost smiling despite everything. Yes. You don't seem like the type to throw parties. You're right, I don't throw parties. But I do occasionally host business dinners that require the kind of aesthetic precision you specialize in. You've never seen my work. I saw the Ashford Chen wedding. Every detail was flawless, including the parts most people wouldn't notice. The compliment landed somewhere soft in her chest. She tried to ignore it. "Why are you texting me?" she asked. "Because I suspect you're drowning in other people's opinions right now and could use a reminder that most people are idiots." This time she did smile. Then she caught herself and wiped it away. "I don't need a pep talk from a stranger." "Good. I wasn't offering one. I was offering a job." Zaria's fingers hovered over the screen. "What kind of job?" "Private dinner, 50 guests. 2 weeks from now." "I need someone who can create an atmosphere that's elegant but not pretentious, sophisticated but not cold. I'm not taking on new clients right now. Because you're too busy or because you're afraid?" The question hit harder than it should have. Zaria felt her jaw tighten. "I'm not afraid, then prove it. Take the job." "You don't even know my rates. I don't care about your rates. I care about quality. Do you want the job or not?" Zaria should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries. Should have recognized that accepting work from a man she'd met once, under bizarre circumstances, was probably a terrible idea. But 3 clients had just canceled or postponed. Her savings account was already thin, and something about Junho's blunt, no-bullshit approach made her want to say yes just to prove she could. "Fine," she typed. "Send me the details. I'll have my assistant contact you." The conversation ended there. Zoraya sat on her bed, still wrapped in her towel, staring at her phone and wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. The next week was brutal. 2 more clients postponed. One didn't cancel outright but requested a different lead stylist, which somehow felt worse. Zoraya spent her days fielding uncomfortable phone calls and her nights scrolling through social media posts that dissected her life like she was a case study in professional failure. The journalist, Diane Rothman, called 3 times. Zoraya didn't answer. She wasn't ready to turn her humiliation into a narrative, even one that might be sympathetic. Marcus tried to stay positive, but even he was getting worried. They'd had 4 events scheduled for the next month. Now they had one. And that one was only happening because the contract had been signed before the wedding incident. "We might need to consider taking on smaller jobs," Marcus said during a call on Thursday, "just to keep cash flow going." Zoraya closed her eyes. Smaller jobs meant birthday parties and corporate team-building events, the kind of work she'd done when she was first starting out, before she'd built her reputation, before she'd proven she could handle high-profile clients. Going back to that felt like admitting defeat. "Let me think about it," she said. "Zoraya, I know this is hard, but I said I'll think about it." She hung up before he could press further. Then she sat in her quiet apartment and let herself feel the full weight of how badly she'd miscalculated. Standing up to Darnell had felt powerful in the moment. Necessary. Like finally reclaiming a part of herself she'd lost somewhere in the wreckage of their marriage. But power was useless if it destroyed everything you'd built. On Friday, Junho's assistant called. Her name was Min Seo, and she was terrifyingly efficient. She rattled off details about the dinner: date, location, guest list, dietary restrictions, aesthetic preferences, with the kind of precision that suggested she'd planned 1,000 events and found them all vaguely beneath her. "Mr. Kang prefers clean lines and natural elements," Min Seo said. "Nothing overly ornate. He wants the space to feel intimate despite the number of guests." Zarya took notes, her professional instincts kicking in despite her exhaustion. "What's the occasion?" "A business dinner. International guests. Discretion is essential." Meaning no social media posts, no behind-the-scenes content. What happens at this event stays private. Zoraya almost laughed. After the week she'd had, privacy sounded like a luxury she couldn't afford to pass up. "Understood," she said. "I'll need access to the venue at least 2 days in advance." "Already arranged. I'll send you the details." The call ended with the same brisk efficiency it had started with. Zoraya sat back and exhaled slowly. At least this was something. One job, one paycheck, one chance to prove she could still do the work that had once defined her. She spent the weekend sketching designs, sourcing materials, and trying not to think about the fact that her entire career now hinged on impressing a man she'd met once in a garden while having an emotional breakdown. On Monday, she drove out to the venue. It was a private estate about 40 minutes outside Birmingham, tucked away behind iron gates and a long, winding driveway. The house itself was modern, all glass and clean angles, surrounded by perfectly manicured grounds that looked like they required a full-time staff to maintain. Min Seo met her at the entrance, dressed in a sharp black suit and heels that clicked against the marble floors with military precision. "Mr. Kang is in a meeting," she said without preamble. "I'll show you the dining room." The space was exactly what Zoraya had expected based on the brief. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a reflection pool, a long table that could seat 60 but would be set for 50. The bones were good, almost too good. The kind of space that didn't need much help to look impressive, which meant every choice she made would be scrutinized. There was nowhere to hide mediocre work in a room this clean. "I'll need to bring in additional lighting," Zoraya said, already mentally cataloging what she'd need. "The natural light is beautiful during the day, but for an evening event, we'll need something warmer." Min Seo made a note on her tablet. Approved. They walked through the rest of the logistics: table settings, floral arrangements, the flow of service. Min Seo answered every question with the kind of efficiency that suggested she'd worked for Junho long enough to anticipate his preferences without asking. Zoraya was halfway through explaining her vision for the centerpieces when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and found Junho standing in the doorway, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked different than he had at the wedding, less formal, but somehow more intimidating in his casualness. "Zoraya," he said, his voice even. "I'm glad you came." "You're paying me to be here," she replied. I'm professional, even when I'm trending on Twitter. His mouth curved slightly. So I saw. You've been keeping track? I like to know when people I've invested in are being unfairly maligned. You haven't invested in me. You hired me for one event. Same thing. Minseo cleared her throat delicately. I'll leave you two to discuss the details. She disappeared with the kind of practiced invisibility that came from years of reading rooms correctly. Zaraya and Junho were left alone in the vast dining room, the silence stretching between them. How are you really doing? Junho asked. Zaria bristled. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar, and you're overly familiar for someone who's technically my client. Would you prefer I pretend we didn't meet under unusual circumstances? I'd prefer you let me do my job without interrogating my emotional state. Junho leaned against the doorframe, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. You're angry. I'm busy. You're angry, he repeated. At yourself, mostly. For losing control. For proving your ex-husband right. Zaraya's hands clenched around her notebook. You don't know anything about me. I know you're the kind of person who'd rather burn herself out than ask for help. I know you measure your worth by your work because someone convinced you that's all you're good for. And I know you're standing here pretending to be fine when you're barely holding it together. The words hit like physical blows. Zaraya felt her composure crack. Why do you care? The question came out sharper than she intended. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. So why do you keep showing up and acting like my well-being matters to you? Junho was quiet for a long moment. Then he pushed off the doorframe and walked closer, stopping a few feet away. Because I've seen what happens when capable people give up, he said quietly, and I have no interest in watching it happen to you. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now. They stared at each other across the expensive flooring. Zaraya could feel her pulse in her throat, could feel the dangerous pull of wanting to believe that someone actually gave a damn whether she succeeded or failed. I should get back to work, she said finally. You should. Junho didn't move. But first, tell me something. What? Are you going to let what happened at that wedding define the rest of your career? Zaria's jaw tightened. That's not fair. It's a simple question. The answer is complicated. No, it's not. Either you let one bad night destroy everything you've built, or you don't. There's nothing complicated about that choice. Easy for you to say. You're not the one being torn apart online. You're right. I'm not. Junho's expression didn't change. But I've been underestimated, dismissed, and written off more times than you can imagine, and I'm still here. You know why? Why? Because I decided that other people's opinions of me were less important than my own knowledge of what I'm capable of. He tilted his head slightly. You're good at what you do, Zaraya. Better than good. So either start acting like it or find a different line of work. The bluntness should have made her angry. Instead, it landed somewhere honest and true. Before she could respond, Junho's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted into something harder. I need to take this, he said. Minseo will help you with whatever you need. He walked out, already answering the call in rapid Korean. Zaraya stood alone in the dining room, her heart pounding, her carefully maintained walls feeling dangerously thin. She spent the rest of the day working, measuring, planning, losing herself in the familiar rhythm of creation. By the time she left, she had a complete design plan and a timeline that would require 16-hour days to execute. She didn't care. Work was the only thing that made sense right now. The next week passed in a blur of logistics and execution. Zaraya threw herself into preparing for Junho's dinner with the kind of obsessive focus that had once driven Darnell crazy. She barely slept, lived on coffee and the kind of takeout that came in styrofoam containers. Let Marcus handle the one remaining event on their calendar while she focused on making this dinner perfect. Because it had to be perfect. Not just good, not just professional, perfect. It was the only way she knew how to prove she was still worth something. 2 days before the event, she was at the estate overseeing the installation of the lighting when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then she remembered that she couldn't afford to miss potential client calls anymore. Zaraya Vale, she said, wedging the phone between her shoulder and ear while she adjusted a pendant lamp. Z,
It's me. She nearly dropped the phone. Darnell, how did you get this number? Her voice came out cold. We were married for 7 years. I've always had your number. I changed it. Brielle found it on social media. Of course she did. Zariah closed her eyes and counted to 5. What do you want, Darnell? I want to talk about what happened at the wedding. There's nothing to talk about. Z, come on. I know things got heated, but we're both adults. We should be able to have a conversation. We had a conversation. At the wedding. In front of 200 people. I think I said everything I needed to say. You were emotional. His tone shifted into something that was probably meant to sound understanding. I get it. Seeing me with Brielle was hard for you. I should have been more sensitive to that.
Zariah's grip on the phone tightened. Sensitive. Yeah, I know the divorce was difficult, and seeing me happy with someone new, that must have brought up a lot of painful feelings. You think I blew up because I'm jealous? I didn't say jealous. I said it was painful. There's a difference. Darnell, I blew up because you publicly humiliated me while I was trying to do my job. That has nothing to do with your relationship and everything to do with you being a cruel, narcissistic. See, this is what I'm talking about. His voice hardened. You get defensive instead of taking responsibility for your part in things. My part? You stood up there and aired our private business to a room full of strangers. You made me look like the villain when all I did was tell the truth about why our marriage failed. Zariah laughed, sharp and bitter. The truth? You want to talk about truth? Let's talk about how you rewrote our entire relationship to make yourself the victim. Let's talk about how you lied about the cheating, the financial manipulation, the way you systematically destroyed my confidence so I'd be too afraid to leave. I never destroyed anything. You did that yourself with your obsession with work. I worked because you made it clear I wasn't enough just being your wife. I worked because you criticized everything I did at home and made me feel like the only thing I was good at was my career. That's not how I remember it. Of course it's not. You've convinced yourself you were some perfect husband, and I was the ungrateful wife who didn't appreciate you. But we both know the truth, Darnell. You just can't admit it. There was a long silence. Then Darnell's voice came back, low and mean. You think you're so much better than me. So strong, so independent. But you're just a bitter woman who threw away a good marriage because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Are you done? No, I'm not. She could hear him breathing hard, could picture his face getting tight the way it always did when he was working himself up into a rage. You want to know why I really called? Brielle's upset. She's been crying for days because of what you said at the wedding. About us, about our relationship. You humiliated her. I humiliated her? Yes. You made it sound like I'm some kind of cheater, like our marriage is illegitimate. She didn't deserve that. Zariah felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Darnell, you started dating Brielle while we were still married. That's not me making it sound like you're a cheater. That's just facts. We were separated. We were in counseling. There's a difference. You always do this, twist things to make yourself the victim. I'm not twisting anything. I'm stating reality. You cheated. You lied about it. And now you're mad because I finally called you out in public. You know what your problem is, Z? His voice dripped with condescension. You can't let go. You're so stuck in the past, so obsessed with being right, that you can't see how pathetic you look. You're 38 years old, single, watching your career collapse because you couldn't keep your mouth shut for one night. The words hit exactly where he meant them to. Zariah felt her breath catch. You're right, she said quietly. I should have kept my mouth shut. I should have stayed silent while you degraded me in front of a room full of people. I should have protected your ego at the expense of my own dignity. That's what a good ex-wife does, right? Don't put words in my mouth. I'm not. I'm just finally understanding what you actually wanted from me, then and now. She paused. We're done, Darnell. Don't call this number again. Z, wait. She hung up. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to set the phone down on a nearby table. One of the lighting techs looked over at her with concern. You okay, boss? Fine, Zariah said automatically. Let's get back to work. But she wasn't fine. She was the opposite of fine. Every word Darnell had said was looping through her head like poison, about her age, her career, her inability to let go. Part of her knew he was just lashing out, trying to regain control of a narrative he'd lost. But part of her wondered if he was right. Maybe she was pathetic. Maybe she was stuck. Maybe she had destroyed her career over ego, an old wound she should have dealt with in therapy instead of at a wedding. She made it through the rest of the day on autopilot, giving instructions she barely registered, making decisions that felt like they were coming from someone else. By the time she got back to her apartment, she was running on fumes and spite. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She almost ignored it. But what if it was a client? What if it was someone who actually wanted to hire her? Zariah Vale, she answered. It's Diane Rothman from Southern Bride magazine. We spoke after the Ashford Chen wedding. Zariah's stomach sank. I'm not interested in doing an interview. I understand, but I wanted to reach out anyway because I think you should know something. What? I've been getting calls from other women who've experienced similar situations. Public humiliation from ex-partners. Professional retaliation for standing up for themselves. Diane paused. Your story is resonating with people, Zariah, in ways you might not realize. My story is a disaster. Your story is about refusing to be silenced. That's powerful. It's cost me my business. Short term, maybe, but I've covered this industry for 20 years, and I can tell you that the people who matter, the clients who actually value artistry and professionalism, they're not going to hold one moment of justified anger against you. Zariah wanted to believe her. God, she wanted to believe her. I appreciate the call, she said carefully, but I'm still not ready for an interview. That's fair. But if you change your mind, the offer stands. Diane's voice softened. And Zariah? For what it's worth, I think you're handling this with a lot more grace than anyone has a right to expect. After they hung up, Zariah sat in her dark apartment and let herself cry for the first time since the wedding. Not pretty crying. Ugly, gasping sobs that left her throat raw and her eyes swollen. She cried for the marriage that had broken her, for the business she'd built and might lose, for the version of herself who'd once believed that working hard and being good at something was enough. When she finally stopped, she felt hollow, but weirdly lighter, like she'd purged something toxic that had been building up for too long. Her phone buzzed again. She almost ignored it. Then she saw it was from JK. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. My office. We need to talk. Zariah stared at the message. About what? About whether you're actually committed to this event or just going through the motions. The bluntness should have offended her. Instead, it felt like a dare. I'm committed, she typed back. Then prove it. 2 p.m. Don't be late. The next day, Zariah drove to an address in downtown Birmingham she'd never been to before. The building was sleek glass and steel, the kind of place that housed law firms and private equity companies. The lobby was all marble and uncomfortable modern art. She gave her name to the receptionist, who directed her to the 20th floor with the kind of cool professionalism that suggested visitors were rare and scrutinized. The elevator ride felt endless. Zariah caught her reflection in the polished doors and barely recognized herself. She looked tired, worn down, like someone who'd been fighting for too long with no clear victory in sight. The 20th floor was quiet. Carpeted hallways, frosted glass doors with no identifying markers. At the end of the hall, one door stood open. Zariah walked toward it and found herself in an office that was somehow both luxurious and austere. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, minimal furniture, a desk that looked like it cost more than her car. Junho sat behind the desk, reviewing something on his computer. He glanced up when she entered. "You're early," he said. "I'm on time." "For you, that's early." He closed the laptop and gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Zariah sat, her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap. Professional armor firmly in place. Junho studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "Your ex-husband called you yesterday." It wasn't a question. Zariah felt her stomach drop. "How did you—" "I have people who monitor things." He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "He upset you." "That's none of your business." "It is if it's going to affect your work." "It won't." "You're sure?" "Yes." Junho leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it. Can you do that?" Zariah nodded, not trusting her voice. "Your ex-husband is irrelevant," Junho said flatly. He's a small man with a fragile ego who spent 7 years of your life making you believe you were less than you are. And even now, after everything, you're still letting him define your worth. I'm not. You are. Every time you second-guess yourself, every time you wonder if you made the right choice standing up to him, every time you let his opinion of you matter more than your own knowledge of your capabilities, you're letting him win. The words hit like a slap. Zariah felt her throat tighten. So what am I supposed to do? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Pretend none of it happened? Pretend I didn't destroy my reputation? No. You acknowledge what happened, learn from it, and move forward. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. You're good at what you do, Zariah. Better than most people I've encountered, but talent means nothing if you don't have the spine to back it up. I have a spine. Then use it. Stop apologizing for existing. Stop shrinking yourself to make other people comfortable. And for God's sake, stop acting like one public argument defines your entire career. Zariah felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking, more like expanding. Why do you care so much? She asked quietly. Junho was silent for a long time. Then he stood and walked to the window, his hands in his pockets, his back to her. I grew up being underestimated, he said finally. Dismissed because of where I came from, what I looked like, the assumptions people made about who I was allowed to be. I learned very young that the only way to survive was to become exactly what they feared, powerful enough that their opinions became irrelevant. He turned to face her. You remind me of who I was before I learned that lesson. Talented, capable, but still seeking permission from people who will never give it. His gaze was intense. I don't want to watch you waste years figuring out what I already know. Which is that you don't need anyone's approval to be extraordinary. You just need to stop waiting for it. The silence that followed felt heavy with something Zariah couldn't quite name. Not attraction, exactly. More like recognition. Like looking at someone and seeing a version of yourself you hadn't known existed. The dinner is in 2 days, Junho said, breaking the moment. Are you ready? Zariah lifted her chin. Yes. Good, because I'm inviting your ex-husband. The world tilted. What? I'm inviting Darnell and his wife to the dinner, Junho repeated calmly. They'll be seated at table 7. You'll have to work around them. Zariah stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Why would you do that? Because you need to prove, to yourself more than anyone, that he doesn't have power over you anymore. Junho's expression didn't change. You can create something beautiful in the same room as the man who tried to destroy you, or you can prove him right by falling apart. Your choice. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, but it is educational. He walked back to his desk and sat down. The invitation has already been sent. He's accepted. So you have 2 options. Rise to the occasion or back out now. Zariah felt like she couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at her to walk out, to refuse, to protect herself from another round of public humiliation. But underneath the fear was something else, something sharp and defiant. Fine, she heard herself say. But when this goes sideways, that's on you. If it goes sideways, I'll handle it. Junho's eyes met hers. But it won't, because you're better than you think you are. Zariah walked out of his office feeling like she'd just agreed to jump off a cliff with no guarantee of a parachute. She had 2 days to create a perfect evening while knowing that Darnell would be in the room, watching, judging, waiting for her to fail. 2 days to prove that she was more than the broken woman he'd left behind. 2 days to figure out if she actually believed that herself. The weight of it settled on her shoulders like concrete as she rode the elevator back down to street level. And somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the doubt, beneath every rational reason to run, a small, stubborn part of her whispered, "Prove him wrong." Zariah didn't sleep for the next 48 hours. She worked instead, because work was the only thing that made sense when the rest of her life felt like it was dissolving. She drove back and forth between Birmingham and the estate, hauling equipment, testing lighting configurations, adjusting every microscopic detail until her eyes burned and her hands cramped. Marcus tried to help, but she kept sending him away. This had to be hers. Every choice, every element, every perfect, flawless inch of it, because Darnell would be watching, and she'd be damned if she gave him anything to criticize. The night before the dinner, She was alone in the dining room at 2 in the morning, adjusting the angle of a centerpiece for the 7th time when she heard footsteps behind her. She spun around, her heart hammering, and found Junho standing in the doorway. He was dressed casually, dark jeans, a t-shirt, his hair slightly disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. It was the most unguarded she'd ever seen him. "You're still here," he said. "So are you." "I live here." That stopped her. "This is your house?" "One of them. Of course." Of course it was. Zoraya turned back to the centerpiece, making another infinitesimal adjustment that probably didn't matter but gave her something to do with her hands. "You should go home," Junho said, walking closer. "Get some sleep." "I'll sleep after the dinner." "You'll collapse before the dinner if you keep this up." "I'm fine." "You're running on fumes and spite. That's not the same thing as fine." Zoraya's jaw tightened. "Why do you care? You got what you wanted. You backed me into a corner and forced me to prove something I'm not even sure I believe anymore." "I didn't force you to do anything. You chose to take this job. After you manipulated me into it. I gave you an opportunity. You decided what to do with it." Zoraya laughed, sharp and bitter. "You invited my ex-husband to watch me work. That's not an opportunity. That's psychological warfare." Junho was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're right." She turned to face him, surprised. "What?" "I said you're right. I did manipulate you. I did back you into a corner." He met her eyes steadily. "And I'd do it again." "Why?" "Because you needed someone to stop letting you play small. And everyone else in your life is too polite or too afraid to do it. That's not your decision to make." "No, it's yours. But you weren't making it." He stepped closer, and Zoraya caught the faint scent of soap and something else, cedar, maybe. "So I made it for you. And now you can either prove me right or prove yourself wrong. Either way, you'll stop being stuck." "I hate you," Zoraya said quietly. "No, you don't. You hate that I'm right." She wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself, wanted to tell him he didn't know her well enough to make those kinds of judgments. But the words stuck in her throat because somewhere underneath the anger and exhaustion, she knew he was right. She did feel stuck, had felt stuck for 2 years, maybe longer. "I need you to leave," she said instead. "I have work to finish." Junho studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded and walked toward the door. He paused in the threshold. "Zoraya." "What?" "Tomorrow night, when he tries to get under your skin, and he will try, remember that you've already survived the worst thing he could do to you. Everything else is just noise." He left before she could respond. Zoraya stood alone in the perfect dining room, surrounded by the evidence of her skill, and felt something shift inside her. Not confidence, exactly. More like resolution. A settling into the understanding that there was no way out of this except through it. She finished adjusting the centerpieces. Then she went home, took a shower hot enough to hurt, and stared at her ceiling until dawn broke through her blinds. The day of the dinner arrived with the kind of bright, aggressive sunshine that felt personally offensive. Zoraya arrived at the estate at noon, her van loaded with the final elements: linens, candles, the custom menu cards she'd had printed on heavy cotton paper. Her hands were steady as she unloaded everything. Her mind was eerily calm. She'd moved past fear into something else, something colder and more focused. Marcus showed up an hour later with 2 assistants Zoraya had hired for the evening. They worked in synchronized silence, transforming the dining room into exactly what she'd envisioned: clean lines, natural elements, white orchids in low ceramic vessels, candles in hurricane glass. The lighting warm but not saccharine, sophisticated but not cold. It was perfect. By 5 o'clock, everything was in place. The catering staff had arrived and were setting up in the kitchen. The sommelier was arranging wine in a temperature-controlled credenza. Minseo appeared periodically to check on progress, her expression inscrutable as always. "Mr. Kong is pleased with the setup," she said during one of her walkthroughs. Zoraya just nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. Her throat felt tight, her stomach hollow. She'd managed to avoid eating all day, and now the thought of food made her nauseous. At 6:30, the first guest began to arrive. Zoraya retreated to a corner of the room where she could observe without being observed. The guests were exactly what she'd expected: wealthy, polished, speaking in the kind of measured tones that suggested every word had been calculated for maximum impact. International business people, according to Min Seo's brief. The kind of people who brokered deals that shaped economies. Junho moved among them with effortless grace, shaking hands, making introductions. His entire demeanor shifted into something more formal. This was a different version of him, the public one, the one who commanded rooms just by entering them. Zoraya watched him work and felt a strange disconnect, like she was seeing someone she didn't actually know. At 7 o'clock, Darnell arrived. Zoraya saw him before he saw her. He walked in with Brielle on his arm, both of them dressed like they were attending a red carpet event. Brielle wore a dress that was just a shade too formal, too attention-seeking for the understated elegance of the room. Darnell's suit was expensive but flashy. Too many buttons, too much sheen. They looked exactly like people trying too hard to belong. Zoraya felt a small, mean satisfaction at that. Then Darnell's eyes found her across the room, and his expression shifted into something that made her skin crawl. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. A knowing one. The smile of someone who thought they'd already won. Zaria turned away and focused on checking the placement cards one more time. Table 7. Exactly where Junho had said they'd be seated. Far enough from the head table to be unremarkable, close enough that Zoraya would have to walk past them multiple times during the evening. She wanted to throw something. Instead, she smoothed down her black dress and reminded herself that she was a professional. Dinner began at 7:30. The first course was served with the kind of precision that came from expensive catering and extensive planning. Zoraya monitored everything from her corner, the timing of the plates, the pour of the wine, the flow of conversation. Everything was going exactly as it should, until it wasn't. She was adjusting the lighting near the bar when she heard Brielle's voice, pitched just loud enough to carry. I mean, it's lovely, but it's a little basic, don't you think? White flowers, simple centerpieces, very safe. Zoraya's jaw clenched. She didn't turn around. I think that's the point, babe, Darnell replied. Zoraya's never been one for taking risks. She likes to play it safe. Keeps her from failing publicly. Several people at nearby tables shifted uncomfortably. Zoraya felt heat crawl up her neck, but she kept her expression neutral and continued her work. Although, Darnell's continued, his voice louder now, public failure seems to be her new specialty, doesn't it? Laughter. Uncomfortable, but present. Zoraya's hands started to shake. She gripped the edge of the bar to steady herself. Darnell, a woman's voice sharp with disapproval. That's enough. I'm just making an observation. This is a professional event, right? We're allowed to critique the work. Zarya finally turned around. Darnell was looking directly at her, his expression smug. Brielle sat beside him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The other guests at their table looked mortified. If you have feedback about the event design, Zoraya said, her voice steady, you're welcome to direct it to Mr. Kang. He hired me. Oh, I'm sure he did. Darnell's tone was loaded with implication. Although I'm curious what qualifications you presented beyond your recent viral fame. The room was getting quieter. People were starting to notice. Zoraya felt something dark and cold settle in her chest. I presented 15 years of experience and a portfolio that speaks for itself, but I understand that concept might be foreign to you. Meaning? Meaning you've built your entire career on connections and charm. Some of us actually have to be good at what we do. Darnell's smile faltered. Careful, Z. Your bitterness is showing, and your insecurity is deafening. Before Darnell could respond, Junho appeared at Zoraya's elbow. He didn't touch her, didn't even look at her. His attention was fixed entirely on Darnell. Mr. Pierce, he said, his voice pleasant but cold. I don't believe we've been introduced. Darnell stood, extending his hand. Darnell Pierce, I know who you are. Junho didn't take his hand. I invited you. The slight was deliberate and public. Darnell's hand dropped back to his side, his face flushing. I wanted to meet this man who thought it was appropriate to critique my event designer's work at a private dinner. Junho's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm curious about what expertise you bring to that assessment. I'm just familiar with her work, Darnell said, trying to recover his composure. We were married. I'm aware, which makes your presence here even more puzzling. Junho tilted his head slightly. Most people with any sense of dignity would decline an invitation to an event being coordinated by their ex-wife, but I suppose different people have different thresholds for appropriate behavior. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Several guests were openly staring now. Darnell's face had gone dark red. I was invited, yes, by me, as a test. Junho's expression didn't change. Ms. Vale has created one of the most elegant events I've had the pleasure of hosting, and I wanted to see if you'd be professional enough to appreciate that work despite your personal history. Clearly, I overestimated you. Brielle made a small sound of protest. Darnell looked like he'd been slapped. I think, Junho continued, his voice still pleasant, still cold, that you and your wife might be more comfortable leaving. I'll have someone call you a car. You can't? I can. This is my home, my event, my guest list. Junho's eyes were black and hard. And I don't tolerate disrespect toward my staff. The word staff landed like a slap. Zaria felt it, felt the reduction of everything she'd built into something small and service-oriented. She opened her mouth to object, but Junho was already gesturing to Minseo, who appeared with 2 security personnel Zaria hadn't even known were present. Gentlemen, Minseo said smoothly, if you'll escort Mr. and Mrs. Pierce to the exit. This is ridiculous, Darnell sputtered. We were invited. And now you're being uninvited. Junho turned away, dismissing him entirely. Enjoy your evening. Security moved in with the kind of efficiency that suggested they'd done this before. Darnell tried to argue, but Brielle was already standing, her face pale with humiliation. Within 2 minutes, they were gone. The room erupted in low murmurs. Junho returned to the head table like nothing had happened, resuming his conversation with a guest, as if there'd been no interruption. Zaria stood frozen, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She should have felt vindicated, triumphant. Darnell had been publicly humiliated and physically removed from the event, but all she felt was hollow, because Junho had called her staff, had reduced her work to something that could be defended like a service rather than recognized as artistry, had fought her battle without asking if she wanted it fought. She made it through the rest of the dinner on autopilot. The subsequent courses were served flawlessly. Guests complimented the ambiance, the food, the seamless execution. Several asked for her card. One woman, a corporate event planner from Singapore, offered her a contract on the spot. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like watching someone else's life through glass. By 11 o'clock, the last guests were leaving. Zaria supervised the cleanup with mechanical precision, directing her assistants, cataloging her materials, checking off items on her mental list. Marcus tried to talk to her, but she brushed him off with vague reassurances. She was breaking down the last of the centerpieces when Junho found her. Leave that, he said. My staff will handle it. I prefer to do my own breakdown. Zaria. She didn't look at him, just kept wrapping stems and damp paper towels with fingers that felt numb. You can't call me staff in front of a room full of people and then expect me to just leave my work unfinished. There was a pause. I was defending you. I didn't ask you to defend me. He was publicly humiliating you, and I was handling it. Zaria finally looked up, and her eyes were hard. I've been handling him for 2 years. I don't need you to swoop in like some kind of savior and reduce me to an employee you're protecting. That's not what I was doing. Then what were you doing? Junho's jaw tightened. I was making it clear that disrespect wouldn't be tolerated in my home. By treating me like hired help, by calling me staff like I'm interchangeable with the caterers, you're twisting my words. I'm repeating them. Zaria's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. Do you have any idea how that felt? To finally stand up to him on my own terms and then have you step in and make it about your authority instead of my worth? I was trying to help. I don't want your help. I want you to see me as something other than a project you need to fix. The words came out louder than she intended, echoing in the empty dining room. Silence. Junho stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he said very quietly, Is that what you think this is? What else am I supposed to think? You invite my ex-husband to test me like I'm some kind of experiment. You manipulate me into taking this job. You defend me in a way that makes me look weak. Everything you've done has been about control. That's not... Junho stopped, ran a hand through his hair. You're right. Zaria blinked. What? You're right. I have been trying to control the situation because I saw someone talented being destroyed by self-doubt, and I thought I could fix it. He met her eyes. But that was arrogant and patronizing, and I apologize. The apology landed wrong, too smooth, too easy. I don't believe you, Zariah heard herself say. Junho's expression shifted into something harder. Excuse me? I don't believe you actually think you were wrong. I think you're apologizing because that's what I want to hear, but you'd do it all again if you had the chance. You don't know that. Don't I? Zariah laughed, and it sounded broken. You just said you'd invite him again, that you'd manipulate me again. You literally told me you'd do it all the same way. Because it worked. For you. It worked for you. You got a perfectly executed event and the satisfaction of putting my ex-husband in his place. But what did I get? I got to perform under surveillance while you orchestrated my emotional breakdown like it was part of the entertainment. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Zariah's voice cracked. You want to know what the worst part is? I actually started to believe you cared, that you saw something in me worth defending. But you were just using me to prove a point about power and control, and I was stupid enough to fall for it. Zariah, don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. I'll send you an invoice for my services. After that, I don't want to hear from you again. She turned and walked toward the door, leaving her supplies scattered across the floor. Marcus would have to come back for them tomorrow. Right now, she just needed to leave before she completely fell apart. You're running, Junho called after her. Zariah stopped but didn't turn around. You're doing exactly what you accused me of pushing you not to do. You're running because this got complicated and uncomfortable, and you'd rather retreat than deal with it. I'm protecting myself, Zariah said quietly. There's a difference. Is there? She didn't answer, just walked out into the cool night air and got into her van with shaking hands. The drive back to Birmingham was a blur. She made it halfway before she had to pull over on the side of the highway because she was crying too hard to see. Great, heaving sobs that left her gasping, her hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in the world. She'd done it. She'd executed a flawless event under impossible circumstances. She'd faced Darnell and held her ground. She'd proven she could still do the work she loved, and somehow it felt like the biggest failure of her life. Because Junho was right. She was running. She'd gotten scared the moment things got real, the moment she felt something other than professional obligation toward him. And instead of facing that, she'd blown up the whole thing and walked away, just like she always did. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, she looked. 7 missed calls, 12 texts, all from numbers she didn't recognize. She opened the first text and felt her blood run cold. It was a link to a video. She clicked it with numb fingers. The video was from tonight. Someone had filmed Junho removing Darnell from the dinner, but it was edited, cut, and spliced to remove all context. In this version, it looked like Junho had arbitrarily kicked out a guest for no reason while Zariah stood by silently. The caption read, Korean Mafia Boss throws out black woman's ex-husband at private dinner. The whole thing was a setup. Hashtag manipulation, hashtag red flags. Zariah's stomach turned over. She scrolled through the other messages. More links, more videos, more commentary. Someone had dug up her connection to Junho, had found out about the wedding incident, had connected dots that created a narrative that was completely false but devastatingly effective. The story being sold was that Junho had orchestrated the entire evening as some kind of power play, that he'd manipulated Zariah into working for him, invited her ex-husband specifically to humiliate him, and that she'd been complicit in the whole thing. The comments were vicious. She's using him for protection, and he's using her for optics, both trash. Imagine being so petty you get your sugar daddy to kick out your ex. This is what happens when women can't let go. Pathetic. Zariah read until the words blurred together. Then she put her phone face down on the passenger seat and tried to remember how to breathe. Everything she'd worked for was gone. Again. But this time, it was worse. Because this time, she'd brought someone else down with her. Her phone rang. Junho's number. She stared at it until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again. On the third call, she answered. I'm so sorry, she said before he could speak. I'm so sorry. I didn't know anyone was filming. I should have been more careful. Stop. His voice was hard. This isn't your fault. It is. If I hadn't reacted, if I just stayed professional, Zariah, stop apologizing. But your reputation is fine. I've been called worse things than a mafia boss, and by people who actually mattered. He paused. Are you safe? The question caught her off guard. What? Are you somewhere safe right now?
I'm pulled over on I-65. Send me your location. Junho, I can't. Send me your location. Now. Something in his tone made her comply. She dropped a pin and sent it before she could second-guess herself. Stay there, he said. I'm coming to get you. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm doing it anyway. His voice softened slightly. You shouldn't be alone right now. I'm fine alone. No, you're not. And that's not a criticism. That's just a fact. He paused. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't leave. He hung up before she could argue. Zariah sat in her van on the side of the highway, watching headlights blur past, and wondered when she'd stopped being able to tell the difference between someone trying to control her and someone actually caring about her.
23 minutes later, a black Mercedes pulled up behind her van. Junho got out, walked to her driver's side window, and tapped on the glass. She rolled it down. Get out, he said. I'm fine here. You're sitting on the side of a highway having a breakdown. You're not fine. Get out. Something about the absolute certainty in his voice made her comply. She climbed out of the van on legs that felt unsteady. Junho studied her face in the glow of the headlights.
You look like hell, he said. Thanks. Come on. He gestured toward his car. We're going back to the estate. I don't want to. I don't care what you want right now. You need somewhere safe to decompress, and your apartment isn't it, not with this story breaking. How do you know where I live? I know a lot of things. He walked toward his car, clearly expecting her to follow. Are you coming, or do I need to physically carry you?
Despite everything, Zariah felt a small, hysterical laugh bubble up. You wouldn't. He turned back and looked at her, and there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. Test me, he said quietly. She got in the car. They drove in silence back toward Montgomery, the city lights giving way to dark highway and then to darker country roads. Zariah leaned her head against the window and watched the trees blur past. I meant what I said, she said finally, about you being manipulative, about all of it. I know. And I'm still angry. Good. You should be. But I'm also confused, because I can't figure out if you actually care about me or if I'm just... She trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. Just what? Interesting to you, like a problem you want to solve. Junho was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. When I was younger, I watched someone I cared about destroy themselves because they were too proud to accept help. They convinced themselves that asking for support was weakness, that accepting kindness meant owing someone something. He glanced at her. They died alone because they'd pushed everyone away. Zariah's throat felt tight. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't make the same mistake. He turned onto the long driveway that led to the estate. You're not a problem I'm trying to solve, Zariah. You're someone I recognized, and I'd rather be manipulative and wrong than watch you disappear because you were too afraid to let someone give a damn. The car stopped in front of the house. Junho killed the engine but didn't move to get out. I'm not good at this, he said quietly, at caring about people without trying to control the outcome. It's a flaw I'm aware of but haven't figured out how to fix. That's not reassuring. It's honest. He turned to look at her. I can't promise I won't fuck this up, but I can promise I'm not using you, and I can promise that when this blows over, and it will blow over, I'll still be here, if you want me to be. Zariah met his eyes searching for the lie, for the angle, for the manipulation. All she saw was a man who looked as tired and uncertain as she felt. Why? She asked. Why do you care so much? Junho reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle and brief. Because you're worth caring about, he said simply. And someone should have told you that a long time ago. Something inside Zariah cracked open. Not breaking. Just opening. Like a door she'd kept locked for so long she'd forgotten there was a room behind it. She started crying again, but this time it felt different. Cleaner somehow. Like she was finally letting go of something that had been poisoning her for years. Junho didn't tell her to stop, didn't try to fix it, just handed her a handkerchief from his pocket and waited. When she finally caught her breath, she said, "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Let someone in. Trust someone. I'm so afraid of getting it wrong again." "Then get it wrong." He shrugged. "Fuck up, make mistakes, be messy and complicated and human. Just stop running from everything that scares you." Zariah laughed, wet and shaky. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple, but it's necessary." He opened his car door. "Come on. You're staying here tonight. Minseo already made up one of the guest rooms." "You were pretty sure I'd come back with you." "I was hopeful." He smiled slightly. "There's a difference." They went inside. The house was quiet, most of the staff gone for the night. Minseo appeared long enough to show Zariah to a room on the second floor, all clean lines and expensive furniture and windows that overlooked the grounds. "There are clothes in the closet if you need them," Minseo said, "and I'll have breakfast ready at 8 unless you prefer later." 8 is fine, Zariah said. "Thank you." Minseo nodded and disappeared with her usual efficiency. Zariah stood alone in the beautiful guest room and felt the adrenaline finally start to drain away. Her body ached, her eyes burned, her mind felt scraped raw. She showered in the attached bathroom, standing under water hot enough to hurt, washing away the night and everything that came with it. When she got out, she found a t-shirt and sleep pants in the closet that were several sizes too big but clean and soft. She climbed into bed and thought she'd lie awake for hours, replaying everything, dissecting every moment, torturing herself with alternate choices. Instead, she fell asleep almost immediately, pulled under by exhaustion so complete it felt like drowning. She dreamed about Darnell, about their wedding day, about the moment she'd realized she'd married someone who would never see her as anything more than an accessory to his life. She dreamed about tonight, about Junho's face when she accused him of manipulation, about her own voice, sharp and scared. She dreamed about standing in an empty room, calling for help, and hearing only silence. When she woke up, the sun was streaming through unfamiliar windows and someone was knocking softly on the door. "Zariah," Junho's voice. "I need to show you something." She sat up, disoriented, her heart already racing. "What is it?" "Just come downstairs when you're ready. It's important." She dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes, ran her fingers through her hair, and made her way downstairs. Junho was in the dining room, his laptop open on the table. He looked up when she entered, and his expression was carefully neutral. "Sit down," he said. "What's going on?" "Just sit." Zariah sat. Junho turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was a news article. The headline read, "Event stylist Zariah Vale linked to organized crime figure Junho Kang." The article detailed their connection, starting with the Ashford Chen wedding and culminating in last night's dinner. It cited anonymous sources, referenced the viral videos, suggested that Zariah was either complicit in or a victim of Kang's known association with international criminal enterprises. Zariah's hands started shaking. "This isn't true," she said. You can't be." Junho closed the laptop. "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." The room felt like it was tilting. Zariah gripped the edge of the table. "Tell me you're not actually involved in organized crime," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Junho met her eyes. "I can't tell you that," he said quietly, "because it would be a lie." And just like that, Zariah's entire world shattered for the second time in less than 12 hours. The silence that followed Junho's confession was absolute. Zariah could hear her own heartbeat, could feel it hammering against her ribs like something trying to escape. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her brain was trying to process the words, trying to make them mean something other than what they clearly meant. "Say something," Junho said quietly. Zariah stood up so fast her chair tipped backward and clattered against the floor. "You're joking." "I'm not." "You have to be joking. This is insane. You're not." She pressed her hands against her temples. "You can't be some kind of criminal. You live in a mansion. You host business dinners. You have an assistant who wears Prada and schedules things in color-coded spreadsheets. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." "Yes, they are. Criminals don't. They don't do what you do. They don't talk like you talk. They don't." She was breathing too fast, the room starting to tilt.
You lied to me. I never lied. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Junho stood but didn't move toward her. I told you I ran businesses. I told you I dealt with international clients. I told you I understood what it meant to be underestimated and dismissed. All of that is true. But you left out the part where you're a goddamn mobster. I prefer the term entrepreneur with unconventional methods.
Zarya laughed, high and sharp, and on the edge of hysterical.
Oh my God. Oh my God, you're serious. You're actually serious. Zarya, don't. She held up a hand backing toward the door. Don't come near me. Don't say my name. Don't. I need to leave. I need to get out of here. You can't. The words stopped her cold. Excuse me?
You can't leave. Not yet. Junho's expression was carefully neutral. There are people watching your apartment, watching Marcus, probably watching anyone you've had contact with in the last month. What people? Journalists, opportunists, and possibly some individuals with less pleasant intentions who think you might be useful leverage against me. Zarya felt like she was falling. This isn't real. This can't be real. I know this is overwhelming. Overwhelming? The word came out as a shriek. You just told me you're a criminal and that I'm trapped here because people might use me as leverage. That's not overwhelming. That's a fucking nightmare. Lower your voice. Why? Are you going to make me disappear if I get too loud? Is that how this works? Junho's jaw tightened. That's not fair. Fair? Zarya was shaking now, her whole body vibrating with rage and terror. You want to talk about fair? You manipulated me into working for you. You inserted yourself into my life. You made me trust you. And the whole time you were, what, using me? Setting me up? I was protecting you. From what? From yourself. From your ex-husband. From the people who were trying to destroy what you'd built. He took a step closer. Everything I did because I saw someone worth protecting. I didn't ask for your protection. I didn't ask to be dragged into whatever criminal enterprise you're running. Her voice cracked. I just wanted to rebuild my life. That's all I wanted. And now I'm what? An accessory? A liability? You're neither of those things. Then what am I? The question hung in the air between them. Junho's expression shifted into something that looked almost vulnerable. You're someone I care about, he said quietly. More than I should. More than is probably smart. Zarya felt tears burning behind her eyes. That doesn't make this okay. I know. It doesn't undo the lies. I know. And it doesn't change the fact that I need to leave. Right now. Today. I can't let you do that. The words were soft but absolute. Zarya felt ice settle in her stomach. What do you mean you can't let me? I mean that if you leave now, without protection, without a plan, you're going to get hurt, or worse. Junho's voice was steady. There are people out there who think you're involved with me, who think you know things, and they will use any method necessary to extract that information. I don't know anything. They don't know that. All they see is a woman who's been spending time with me, working for me, staying in my home. They see a connection they can exploit. Zarya sank down onto the edge of the dining table, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. This can't be happening. I'm sorry. And he did sound sorry. Genuinely, devastatingly sorry. I never meant for it to get this far. I thought I could keep you separate from the other parts of my life. But I underestimated how much attention the wedding incident would generate. And I underestimated how quickly people would connect the dots. Who are you? The question came out broken. Who are you really? Junho was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, his hands folded on the table. My family has been involved in certain business operations for 3 generations, he said carefully. Import-export, initially. Then we expanded into other areas, financial services, real estate, entertainment. Some of it is legal, some of it exists in gray areas, and some of it is explicitly illegal by most international standards. What kind of illegal? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. Zarya met his eyes. If I'm going to be trapped here, if I'm going to be in danger because of you, I deserve to know exactly what you do. Junho studied her face. Then he nodded slowly. We facilitate transactions, he said, between parties who can't or won't work through traditional channels. We move money across borders in ways that avoid certain regulatory oversight. We provide security services for individuals and organizations who require discretion. And yes, occasionally we handle goods that would be considered contraband in certain jurisdictions. Drugs? No, never drugs. That's a line my family has never crossed. Weapons? Sometimes. Zaria closed her eyes. Jesus Christ. I've never killed anyone, Junho said quietly. I've never ordered anyone killed. I've never participated in human trafficking or exploitation. There are lines I won't cross, but I'm not going to pretend I'm innocent. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked, and because if we're going to get through the next few days, you need to understand what we're dealing with. The next few days? Zariah's eyes snapped open. How long do you expect me to stay here? Until I can guarantee your safety, until the media attention dies down, until I can put protective measures in place that will allow you to go back to your life without constant surveillance. And how long will that take? I don't know. A week? Maybe 2. 2 weeks! Zariah laughed, and it sounded unhinged even to her own ears. You expect me to just stay here for 2 weeks like some kind of prisoner? Like a guest who's being protected? That's the same thing. It's not. A prisoner doesn't have choices. You do. What choices? You just said I can't leave. You can't leave safely, but you can choose how you spend the time you're here. You can choose whether to trust that I'm doing everything possible to keep you safe. And you can choose whether to believe that I never wanted any of this for you. Zariah stared at him, searching his face for the lie, for the manipulation, for the angle she knew had to be there. All she saw was exhaustion and something that looked uncomfortably like regret. I hate you, she said quietly. I know. I trusted you. I know. And you broke that trust in the worst possible way. Yes, Junho's voice was steady. I did. And I will spend however long it takes trying to earn it back. But right now, right this minute, I need you to let me keep you alive. Can you do that? Zariah wanted to say no, wanted to stand up, walk out, take her chances with whatever danger was waiting outside these walls, wanted to prove that she didn't need him, didn't need anyone, could handle everything on her own just like she always had. But she was so tired of fighting alone. Fine, she said finally, 2 weeks. But after that, I'm gone. And I don't ever want to see you again. Something flickered across Junho's face, pain maybe, or resignation. Understood. He stood and walked toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, he said without turning around, meeting you was the first time in years I've wanted to be someone different than who I am. That doesn't excuse anything, but it's true. He left before she could respond. Zariah sat alone in the dining room, surrounded by the remnants of last night's perfect event, and tried to figure out how her life had gone so completely off the rails. The next 3 days were surreal. Minseo brought her meals at regular intervals and acted like nothing was unusual about Zariah being essentially under house arrest. Marcus called twice, frantic with worry, and Zariah had to lie and tell him she was fine, just taking a few days off to decompress. The calls were brief because Junho had explained that her phone was almost certainly being monitored and anything she said could be used against her. She spent most of her time in the guest room, alternating between pacing and staring out the window at the perfectly manicured grounds. She tried to work, sketching designs for events she might never get to execute, making lists of suppliers she might never call again. But it all felt pointless. Her career was destroyed. Her reputation was in tatters. And she was trapped in a mansion with a man who'd lied to her about everything that mattered. On the 4th day, Junho knocked on her door. What? She called out without opening it. I need to show you something. I'm not interested. It's about Darnell. That got her attention. She opened the door. What about him? Junho's expression was grim. He's been talking to reporters, selling stories about you, about us. He's claiming you were involved with me while you were still married to him. Zariah felt the blood drain from her face. That's a lie. I know. But he has dates, photos. He's constructed a timeline that makes it look credible. How is that possible? I didn't even know you existed until a month ago. He's using the wedding as a starting point and working backward, suggesting that I approached you before the event, that we'd been in communication for months. Junho's jaw was tight. It's creative fiction, but it's convincing enough that several outlets are running with it. Oh my God. Zariah sank down onto the bed. He's destroying me. Again. He's trying to, but we can fight back. How? By telling the truth. By going public with the actual timeline. By showing that his narrative is fabricated. Zariah laughed bitterly. And who's going to believe me? I'm the woman who had a public meltdown at a wedding and then immediately started working for a known criminal. I'm not exactly a credible witness to my own life. You're more credible than he is. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, we're both liars. The only difference is he's better at it. Junho was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down beside her on the bed, careful to maintain distance. Do you want to know why I really invited him to the dinner? He asked. To test me. You already said that. That was part of it. But the other part was that I wanted to see who he really was. What kind of man would accept an invitation to an event being coordinated by his ex-wife? What kind of person would show up ready to cause pain just because he could? Why did that matter to you? Because I needed to know if you were still in love with him. Zariah turned to stare at him. What? I needed to know if you were holding on to something that was already dead. If you were staying stuck because part of you still hoped he'd realize what he'd lost and come back. Junho met her eyes. Because if that was the case, then everything I was feeling was pointless. Everything you were feeling, Zariah repeated slowly. What exactly were you feeling? Don't make me say it. No, say it. You owe me that much. Junho looked away, his jaw working. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I was feeling like maybe I didn't have to be the person my family raised me to be. Like maybe there was a version of my life where I could be someone worth knowing, someone worth caring about. He paused. Someone worth loving. The words hung in the air between them. Zariah's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear her own thoughts. You don't love me, she said. You barely know me. I know you're brilliant at what you do. I know you're stronger than you think you are. I know you rebuild yourself every time someone tries to break you. And I know that when you smile, really smile, not the professional version, it's the most honest thing I've ever seen. Stop. Why? Because you're a criminal. Because you lied to me. Because this entire situation is fucked up and wrong, and I can't let myself feel anything for you. Can't or won't. Does it matter? Yes. Zariah stood up abruptly, putting distance between them. You don't get to do this. You don't get to trap me here and then confess feelings like that makes everything okay. I'm not trying to make anything okay. I'm trying to be honest. You should have been honest from the beginning. You're right. I should have. Junho stood as well. But I wasn't, and I can't change that. All I can do is tell you the truth now and hope it matters. It doesn't. Liar. The word was soft, but it landed like a punch. Zariah felt her composure crack. Don't call me a liar. Then don't lie. Not to me. Not to yourself. Junho took a step closer. You feel something. I know you do. You wouldn't be this angry if you didn't. I'm angry because you betrayed my trust. You're angry because you care and you don't want to, because caring about me is complicated and dangerous, and it would be so much easier if you could just hate me. I do hate you. No, you don't. Another step closer. You hate what I am. You hate what I represent. You hate that I make you feel things you're not ready to feel. But you don't hate me. Zariah's back hit the wall. She hadn't even realized she'd been retreating. Junho stopped a few feet away, giving her space but making his point. Tell me I'm wrong, he said quietly. Look me in the eye and tell me you feel nothing, and I'll walk out of this room and leave you alone for the rest of your time here. Zariah opened her mouth. The lie should have been easy, should have been automatic. But the words stuck in her throat because somewhere underneath the fear and the anger and the betrayal, there was something else. Something that had been growing since the moment he'd found her in the garden after the wedding. Something that had taken root despite every rational reason not to let it. I can't, she whispered. Can't what? Can't tell you I feel nothing. The admission felt like losing. But that doesn't mean anything. Feeling something doesn't mean I trust you, doesn't mean I forgive you, doesn't mean this is anything other than Stockholm Syndrome and trauma bonding. It could mean all those things, or it could mean something else entirely. Junho's voice was gentle. But we'll never know if you keep running from it. I'm not running. I'm being smart. You're being scared. Same thing.
No, it's not. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her face. Just his fingers against her cheek, barely there. Being scared is human. Running from everything that scares you is cowardice. And you're not a coward, Zariah. She should have stepped away, should have slapped his hand aside, should have done literally anything other than stand there with tears streaming down her face while he looked at her like she was something precious instead of something broken.
I don't know how to do this, she said. Do what? Trust someone who's hurt me. Let someone in when I know they could destroy me. Her voice was shaking. Darnell took 7 years of my life and made me believe I was worthless. And you took 3 weeks and made me believe I could be worth something, but you lied. And I don't know how to reconcile those things. Maybe you don't have to reconcile them. Maybe you just have to decide if I'm worth the risk. Are you? Junho's thumb brushed away a tear. I don't know, but I want to be. The honesty of it broke something open in her chest. Before she could second-guess herself, before rational thought could intervene, Zariah closed the distance between them and kissed him. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't romantic, it was desperate and angry and edged with 2 years of loneliness and 3 weeks of confusion and 4 days of being trapped with someone who saw her more clearly than she saw herself. Junho made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, his hands in her hair, against her back, everywhere at once. The kiss deepened into something that felt like drowning and breathing at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zariah rested her forehead against his chest. This doesn't fix anything, she said. I know. I'm still angry. I know. And I still don't trust you. I know. His arms tightened around her. But it's a start. They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing, just existing in the same space without fighting or fleeing. Then Zariah's phone rang. She pulled away reluctantly and checked the screen. Marcus. I should answer, she said. Junho nodded and stepped back, giving her space. Hey, she answered, trying to sound normal. Zariah, thank God. Marcus sounded panicked. Where are you? I'm staying with a friend. Why? What's wrong? Everything is wrong. Darnell is on every news channel talking about how you were having an affair with some Korean crime boss. There are reporters camped outside your apartment. Someone tried to break into the office looking for files, and I just got a call from a lawyer saying you're being sued. Zariah's stomach dropped. Sued for what? Breach of contract, professional misconduct. 3 of our former clients are claiming you created a hostile work environment and demanding refunds for services rendered. That's insane. I know. I know it's bullshit. But Zariah, they have lawyers, good ones, and they're claiming they have evidence that you were unstable, unprofessional, and involved in illegal activities through your association with Kang. Junho hasn't been convicted of anything. Doesn't matter. The association alone is enough to damage your reputation, and with the wedding video still circulating, they're building a case that you've been erratic for months. Zariah sank down onto the bed. How much are they asking for? Combined? Almost $200,000. The number hit like a physical blow. Zariah didn't have $200,000. She barely had $20,000 in savings after 2 years of rebuilding. I can't fight this, she said quietly. I don't have the money for lawyers. I don't have the evidence to prove them wrong. I don't have anything. Yes, you do. Marcus's voice was fierce. You have me. You have your portfolio. You have every single client who's ever praised your work. We can fight this, Zariah. But you need to come back. You need to be visible. You need to show them you're not hiding. I can't come back. Not yet. Why not? Zariah glanced at Junho, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. It's complicated, she said finally. Zariah, whatever's going on with you and Kang, you need to end it. Now. Today. Because every day you spend with him is another day they can use against you in court. I know. Do you? Because from here it looks like you're choosing him over your career, over everything you've built. And I love you, but I can't watch you self-destruct like this. The words stung because they were true. Every hour she spent here was another nail in the coffin of her professional life. But leaving meant exposing herself to danger she couldn't see or understand. "I need a few more days," she said. "You don't have a few more days. The lawsuit is moving forward. The media is tearing you apart, and Darnell is winning." Marcus paused. "Please, Zariah, come home. Let me help you fight this the right way." "I'll think about it." "That's not good enough. It's all I can give you right now." There was a long silence. Then Marcus said very quietly, "If you don't come back, I'm going to have to distance myself from the business. I can't afford to have my name attached to this mess. I'm sorry, but I have to protect my own career." The words felt like a betrayal, but Zariah couldn't blame him. He had his own life to protect, his own future to consider. "I understand," she said. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You're doing what you have to do." Her voice was steady even though her hands were shaking. "Thank you for everything, Marcus, for all of it." "Zariah." She hung up before he could say anything else. Then she sat there staring at her phone, watching her entire professional life collapse in real time. "I have to go back," she said without looking at Junho. "I know. I have to fight this, even if it means exposing myself to whatever danger is out there. I can't let Darnell win. Not again." "I know." "So you'll let me leave?" Junho was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "No." Zariah's head snapped up. "What?" "I won't let you leave. Not like this. Not unprotected." "You don't have a choice." "Actually, I do. You're in my home, under my protection, and I'm not releasing you until I know you'll be safe." The casual authoritarianism of it made her blood boil. "You can't keep me prisoner." "I can, and I will. Because the alternative is watching you walk into a situation that could get you killed. That's my risk to take. Not when I'm the one who put you in danger in the first place." Junho's voice was hard. "You want to hate me? Fine. Hate me. But I'm not letting you die because you're too stubborn to accept help." "This isn't help. This is control." "Call it whatever you want. The result is the same. You're staying here until I can guarantee your safety." Zariah stood up, her whole body shaking with rage. "You're exactly like him, exactly like Darnell, making decisions for me, telling me what I can and can't do, treating me like I'm too stupid or too weak to manage my own life." The comparison hit Junho like a slap. His expression went cold. "I am nothing like your ex-husband." "Aren't you?" "Because from where I'm standing, you're both men who think they know what's best for me, who think they have the right to make my choices for me. The only difference is Darnell destroyed me with cruelty, and you're trying to destroy me with kindness. I'm trying to keep you alive." "I don't want to just be alive." The words came out as a scream. "I want my life back. I want my career back. I want to be able to walk down the street without wondering if someone's going to use me as leverage against you. I want to not be afraid anymore." Her voice broke on the last word. She was crying again, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Junho moved toward her, but she held up a hand. "Don't," she choked out. "Don't touch me. Don't comfort me. Don't. I can't breathe when you're close to me." He stopped immediately, his hands dropping to his sides. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. "Let me go." "I can't." "Then we have nothing else to talk about." Zariah walked past him and locked herself in the attached bathroom. She slid down against the door and let herself break apart completely, her sobs echoing off the tile. Outside, she heard Junho's footsteps, heard him pause by the door, heard him say something in Korean that sounded like a prayer or a curse. Then his footsteps retreated, and she was alone. She stayed in the bathroom for hours, crying until she had nothing left. When she finally emerged, red-eyed and hollow, the bedroom was empty. Someone, probably Min Seo, had left a tray of food on the desk. Zariah ignored it. She spent the rest of the day staring out the window, watching the sun arc across the sky, trying to figure out how everything had gone so catastrophically wrong. That night, she heard shouting. It was coming from somewhere downstairs, angry voices in Korean, rapid fire and heated. She crept to her door and opened it a crack. Junho and another man were arguing in the foyer. The other man was older, probably in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit and radiating authority. His voice was sharp, cutting, demanding. Junho responded in the same language, his tone defensive but firm. The older man said something that made Junho's entire body go rigid. Then he switched to English. "You're weak, just like your father was weak. You let sentiment cloud your judgment, and now you've endangered everything we've built. I've endangered nothing, Junho replied in English. The situation is manageable. Manageable? You've exposed our entire operation for a woman you barely know. You've drawn attention from law enforcement, from rivals, from every angle that could destroy us. And for what? Because you developed feelings? I'm handling it. You're compromised, which means you're no longer fit to lead. The older man's voice was cold. The council has voted. You're being removed from operational authority until this mess is cleaned up. You can't do that. I just did. And if you can't make the hard decisions that need to be made, I'll make them for you. What does that mean? The older man didn't answer, just turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he glanced back. The girl is a liability. You know what needs to be done. The door closed behind him with a finality that made Zoraya's blood run cold. She watched Junho stand there in the empty foyer, his shoulders tight, his hands clenched into fists. Then he looked up and saw her standing at the top of the stairs. Their eyes met across the distance. And in that moment, Zoraya realized with absolute certainty that she was in far more danger than she'd ever imagined. Not from Darnell, not from the media, not from some abstract criminal threat, but from the very man who'd promised to protect her. The silence in the dining room was suffocating. Zoraya stared at Junho across the table, her mind trying to process words that didn't make sense strung together in that particular order. He couldn't have just said what she thought he said. He couldn't have just admitted to being exactly what the article claimed. Say something, Junho said quietly. You're lying. Her voice came out flat. You're testing me again, seeing how I'll react. I'm not. Then tell me you're joking. Tell me this is some kind of fucked up way of making a point about trust. I can't. Zoraya stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. You're telling me that everything, the wedding, the dinner, this whole thing, was what? A recruitment? A setup? No. Junho's voice was steady, too steady. I'm telling you that I saw someone being destroyed by a small man's cruelty, and I decided to step in. What I do for a living doesn't change that. What you do for a living? Zoraya laughed, and it sounded hysterical. You run organized crime operations. You're a, what did the article say? International criminal enterprise? Those are words people use when they don't understand the full picture. Then explain the full picture. Junho stood as well, his movements controlled. I facilitate business transactions that exist outside traditional legal frameworks. I broker deals, I protect interests, I ensure that agreements are honored when courts and contracts aren't enough. That's a fancy way of saying you're a criminal. It's an accurate way of saying I operate in spaces where the law is either absent or irrelevant. He met her eyes. I'm not a good man, Zoraya. I've never claimed to be. But I'm not what you're imagining either. You don't know what I'm imagining. You're imagining violence, drugs, human trafficking, the things movies tell you people like me do. His voice was quiet. I don't do those things. I have lines. But I won't pretend I'm legitimate. Zarya felt like the floor was dissolving beneath her feet. How long were you planning to tell me this? I wasn't sure I was going to tell you at all. Why? Because I knew it would scare you away, and I didn't want to lose... He stopped, looked away. It doesn't matter now. Finish the sentence. I didn't want to lose the first person in years who looked at me like I was just a man instead of a threat. The words landed somewhere soft in Zoraya's chest, but she pushed the feeling away. She couldn't afford softness right now. I need to leave, she said. I know. I need to never see you again. I know that too. Then why did you tell me? Junho's jaw tightened. Because that article is just the beginning. Within 24 hours, reporters are going to start digging into your connection to me. They're going to find out about the dinner, about the wedding incident, about everything. And you deserve to hear the truth from me before you heard it from someone else. How considerate. I'm trying to protect you. By destroying my life? Zoraya's voice rose. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to what's left of my career? No one will touch me now. No one will hire the event stylist who's linked to organized crime. I'm done. Completely done. No, you're not. You don't get to tell me that. Someone needs to. Junho stepped closer. This will be bad for a while. It will be ugly and painful and unfair. But you're stronger than this. You've survived worse. I survived a divorce. I didn't survive being collateral damage in a federal investigation. There's no investigation. Zariah stopped. What? There's no federal investigation. I made sure of it. You can't just make that go away. I can, and I did. His expression was hard. Whatever happens to you because of our association, it won't include criminal charges. You have my word on that. Your word means nothing to me anymore. The words were meant to cut, and they did. Zariah saw something flicker across Junho's face, pain, maybe, or regret, before his expression went neutral again. That's fair, he said quietly, but it's still the truth. You're protected, legally, financially, physically. Whatever you need to rebuild after this, I'll make sure you have it. I don't want your money. Then don't take it, but know that it's available if you change your mind. He walked to a drawer in the sideboard and pulled out an envelope. Your payment for the dinner, plus a substantial bonus for the damage this association is going to cause. He set it on the table. Zariah didn't touch it. I need you to take me back to my van, she said. Minseo can drive you. I want you to take me. Something in her tone made him nod. They walked to his car in silence, the morning sun too bright and cheerful for the wreckage of what was happening. The drive back to where she'd abandoned her van felt endless and too short all at once. When they arrived, Junho put the car in park but didn't kill the engine. For what it's worth, he said, staring straight ahead, everything I said to you is true. About your talent, about your strength, about you being worth caring about. None of that was part of some agenda. How am I supposed to believe that? You're not. That's the problem with trust. Once it's broken, there's no proof strong enough to rebuild it. He finally looked at her. But I'm going to say it anyway, because you deserve to hear it. You changed something in me, made me remember what it felt like to want to be better than I am. That's not nothing. Zariah felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Goodbye, Junho. She got out of the car before he could respond, climbed into her van with shaking hands, started the engine and pulled back onto the highway without looking back. She made it 10 miles before she had to pull over again to cry. The next 72 hours were a special kind of hell. The story exploded across local news, then regional, then national. Zariah's phone rang constantly. Reporters, bloggers, people claiming to be journalists but sounding more like vultures. She stopped answering, stopped checking social media, stopped looking at the news. Marcus called 14 times before she finally picked up. Are you okay? He asked immediately. No. Where are you? My apartment. Stay there. I'm coming over. He arrived 20 minutes later with groceries, coffee, and a determination to be helpful that made Zariah want to both hug him and tell him to leave. He made her eat, made her drink water, made her take a shower while he fielded calls and emails on her behalf. When she came out, he was sitting on her couch with her laptop open, his expression grim. How bad is it? She asked. Bad. 3 more clients have canceled. The Hendricks family is threatening to sue for breach of contract even though they already canceled, and someone started a petition to have you banned from working weddings in Alabama. Zariah sat down heavily. A petition. It has 6,000 signatures. She laughed, but it came out broken. Of course it does. Marcus closed the laptop and looked at her with something that might have been pity. What do you want to do? I don't know. We could release a statement. Distance yourself from Kang. Claim you didn't know about his background. That would be a lie. It would be survival. Zariah thought about that, about how easy it would be to throw Junho under the bus, to paint herself as a victim, to trade the truth for public sympathy. Part of her wanted to. The part that was tired and scared and desperate to make the pain stop. But a larger part, the part that had finally started learning what it meant to have integrity, couldn't do it. No, she said finally. I'm not lying. I made my choices. I'll deal with the consequences. Marcus studied her face. You care about him. I don't even know him. That's not what I asked. Zariah looked away. It doesn't matter what I feel. He's not who I thought he was. Maybe he's exactly who he was. You just didn't want to see it. The words stung because they were true. She'd seen the control, the manipulation. The way Junho moved through the world like someone who was used to getting what he wanted regardless of cost. She'd just chosen to interpret it as confidence instead of what it actually was. Power built on foundations she didn't want to examine. "I need to be alone for a while," she said. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Call me if you need anything. And Zariah, don't do anything stupid." "Like what?" "Like deciding this is the end. It's not. It's just another shitty chapter in what's turning out to be a really complicated book." After he left, Zariah sat in her quiet apartment and thought about everything that had happened in the past 3 weeks. The wedding, the confrontation with Darnell, the dinner, the revelation. Each moment felt connected by a thread she couldn't quite grasp. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She almost deleted it without reading. Then she saw the preview. "This is Diane Rothman. I'd still like to do that interview." Now more than ever. Zariah stared at the message for a long time. An interview would be a risk. It could backfire spectacularly, but it would also be a chance to tell her story on her own terms instead of letting other people shape the narrative. She typed back, "When and where?" The interview happened 2 days later in a coffee shop in Birmingham that Diane chose specifically because it was public enough to be safe but quiet enough for conversation. Zariah arrived early, her stomach in knots, her hands clammy. Diane showed up exactly on time, dressed casually, carrying a recorder and a notebook. "Thank you for agreeing to this," she said, sitting down across from Zariah. "I know it's not easy." "Nothing has been easy lately." "Then let's start there. Tell me about the Ashford Chen wedding." And Zariah did. She told Diane everything, about Darnell's cruelty, about her response, about the viral videos and the professional fallout, about Junho appearing in the garden with advice that felt invasive and true, about the dinner and what came after. She didn't lie, didn't minimize, didn't try to make herself look better than she was. When she got to the part about Junho's revelation, Diane leaned forward. "Did you know about his background before that morning?" "No. I knew he was wealthy and connected, but I didn't know the specifics." "And if you had known?" Zariah thought about that, really thought about it. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe I would have stayed away. Maybe I would have convinced myself I could handle it. I'd like to think I would have been smart enough to walk away, but I'm not sure that's true." "Why not?" "Because for the first time in 2 years, someone looked at me and saw potential instead of damage. That's a powerful drug when you've been starving for it." Diane made notes. "Do you regret meeting him?" "I regret the timing, the circumstances, the fallout." Zariah paused. "But I don't regret learning that I was capable of standing up for myself, even if I did it messily." "What about the allegations that you were complicit in Kang's operations?" "They're false. I styled one event for him. That's the extent of our professional relationship." "And personally?" Zariah's throat felt tight. "Personally, I made the mistake of trusting someone who wasn't honest about who he was. That's on me, but it doesn't make me a criminal." The interview lasted 2 hours. By the end, Zariah felt wrung out, but strangely lighter. Like she'd lanced a wound that had been festering. Diane turned off her recorder and looked at Zariah with something that might have been respect. "You're braver than you think you are," she said. "I don't feel brave." "Brave people rarely do. They just keep moving forward anyway." The article came out a week later. It was fair, honest. It presented Zariah as a flawed, complicated person who'd made imperfect choices in impossible circumstances. It didn't absolve her, but it didn't crucify her either. The response was mixed. Some people were sympathetic. Others remained convinced she was either a victim or a criminal. But the conversation shifted from outright condemnation to something more nuanced. 3 clients reached out to reschedule consultations. One explicitly said she admired Zariah's honesty in the interview. It wasn't a flood of support, but it was something. Marcus called her the day the article dropped. "You're trending again," he said, "but this time it's not all bad." "What percentage is bad?" 60-40. Zariah laughed despite herself. "I'll take it." "There's something else. The Ashford Chen wedding couple wants to meet with you." "Why?" "They didn't say, but Michaela Chen specifically requested it, said it was important." The meeting happened at a restaurant in Montgomery, neutral territory. Zariah arrived expecting confrontation or maybe an apology. What she got was neither. Michaela and her husband David sat across from her, both looking serious but not hostile. "We wanted to thank you," Michaela said. Zariah blinked. "For what?" "For making our wedding memorable. Not because of the drama, although that certainly made it unforgettable, but because you created something beautiful under impossible circumstances." Michaela smiled, "And because what happened at our wedding started a conversation we needed to have as a family." "About what?" "About how we treat divorced women, about the assumptions we make, about cruelty disguised as honesty." David leaned forward. "Darnell Pierce is no longer welcome in our social circle. Not because of you, but because we finally saw him for what he is." "Several of our guests have reached out since that night," Michaela added. "Women who've experienced similar situations, who felt seen by what you said. You didn't just defend yourself, you gave other people permission to do the same." Zariah felt something hot and sharp in her chest. "I didn't mean to make a statement. The best statements are the ones we don't plan." Michaela handed her an envelope. "This is a list of referrals. Women who want to hire you specifically because of what happened, not in spite of it." Zariah opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were 12 names, contact information, and brief notes about events they wanted to plan. 12 potential clients. 12 people who weren't afraid of her messy, complicated story. "I don't know what to say," Zariah whispered. "Say you'll keep doing what you're good at," David replied. "The world needs more people who refuse to disappear quietly." After they left, Zariah sat alone at the table and cried. But this time it felt different, like she was finally crying for the right reasons. 2 weeks later, Zariah was in her apartment working on a proposal for one of the referrals when someone knocked on her door. She looked through the peephole and her heart stopped. Darnell stood in the hallway, alone, looking smaller somehow than she remembered. She considered not answering, considered calling the police, considered a dozen different ways of protecting herself. Instead, she opened the door. "What do you want?" she asked, keeping her hand on the doorframe. Darnell's eyes were bloodshot. His suit was wrinkled. He looked like he'd been crying. "I need to talk to you," he said. "We have nothing to talk about." "Please, 5 minutes." Every instinct told her to say no, to close the door and block his number and move on with her life. But something in his face, something broken and desperate, made her step back and let him in. He stood in her small living room like he didn't know what to do with his hands. Zariah crossed her arms and waited. "Brielle left me," he said finally. "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not." "You're right. I'm not." Darnell flinched. "She said I was obsessed with you, that I spent more time talking about you than I did building a life with her. She said I was—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "She said I was pathetic." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because she was right." He looked at her and his eyes were wet. "I was obsessed. I am obsessed. Not with you specifically, but with proving that leaving you was the right choice, that I was justified, that you were the problem." "I was never the problem, Darnell." "I know," his voice cracked. "I know that now. But I spent 7 years convincing myself otherwise, and then another 2 years trying to make you pay for the guilt I felt." Zariah felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. More like release. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly. "Because I owe you an apology, a real one, not the bullshit I tried to sell you on the phone." He took a shaky breath. "I cheated on you. I lied about it. I made you think you were crazy for suspecting the truth. I blamed you for problems I created, and then when you finally stood up for yourself, I tried to destroy you for it. Yes, you did all of those things. I'm sorry." Tears were running down his face now. "I'm so fucking sorry, Zariah. You deserved better. You deserved everything. And I was too broken and scared to give it to you." Zariah watched him cry and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a profound, exhausted nothing. "I forgive you," she said. Darnell's head snapped up. "What?" "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, not because this apology fixes anything, but because I'm tired of carrying anger that only hurts me." She walked to the door and opened it. "But that doesn't mean I want you in my life. So thank you for the apology. And goodbye." Zariah. Goodbye, Darnell. He stood there for a long moment, like he wanted to say more. Then he nodded and walked out. Zariah closed the door behind him and leaned against it, waiting for the wave of emotion to hit. It didn't come. She just felt tired and free. She picked up her phone and sent a text to the number she'd deleted and rememorized a dozen times. Can we talk? The response came 30 seconds later. When and where? They met at the reflection pool on Junho's estate because Zariah wanted neutral ground that wasn't actually neutral. She arrived at sunset, the sky bleeding orange and pink across the water. Junho was already there, standing at the edge of the pool in jeans and a dark sweater. He looked different without the expensive suit, younger, more human. "Thank you for coming," he said when she approached. "I'm not here to forgive you. I know. I'm here because I need to understand something. Ask." Zaria looked out at the water, gathering her thoughts. "That night in the garden, when you told me to go back inside and finish my work, was that real, or was that you sizing me up for something?" Junho was quiet for a long time. "It was real. I saw someone being humiliated for standing up to cruelty, and it made me angry. Everything that came after, that got complicated, but that first moment was just human. And the dinner was me being selfish. I wanted to spend time with you. I wanted to see if the person I met in the garden was as remarkable as I thought, so I manufactured a reason. By inviting my ex-husband. Yes, that was cruel." "I know." He finally looked at her. "I told myself I was pushing you to be stronger, but really, I was testing whether you'd break. Because I needed to know if you were strong enough to exist in my world. I'm not. I know that too now." His smile was sad. "You're strong in different ways. Better ways." "I read the article about you," Zariah said. "The one that came out last week, the investigative piece. And it confirmed everything you told me. Plus, some things you didn't." Junho's jaw tightened. "What do you want to know?" "Have you ever killed anyone?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "Yes," Junho said quietly. "In self-defense, but yes." Zariah felt her stomach turn over. "Have you ever hurt someone who didn't deserve it?" "Define deserve." "You know what I mean." He looked away. "I've done things I'm not proud of. Made choices that kept me alive but cost other people. I won't lie to you about that." "Why did you tell me the truth? You could have let me walk away thinking you were just wealthy and connected. I never would have known. Because I was tired of being seen as a monster or a myth. And for about 5 minutes, you looked at me like I was just a man." He turned back to her. "I wanted that to be based on truth, even if it meant losing it." Zariah felt tears prickling at her eyes. "You did lose it. I know. But I don't hate you. You should. Probably." She smiled despite herself. "But I'm bad at doing what I should." They stood in silence, watching the last of the sunset fade into twilight. The air was cool and smelled like pine and water. "What happens now?" Junho asked. "I go back to Birmingham. I rebuild my business. I figure out who I am when I'm not defined by my marriage, or my divorce, or my proximity to you." "And us?" "There is no us." Zariah's voice was gentle but firm. "There can't be. You know that." "I do. But I needed to hear you say it." "Why?" "Because I needed to know it was real. That you weren't just someone I projected onto. That what I felt was..." He trailed off. "Was what?" "Something worth feeling, even if it couldn't last." Zariah's throat felt tight. She reached out and touched his hand briefly, then pulled away. "Take care of yourself, Junho." "You too." She walked back to her van without looking back, drove away from the estate and the man who'd entered her life like a storm and left her landscape permanently altered. It hurt, but it was the right kind of hurt, the kind that meant she was choosing herself. 3 months later, Zariah's business was thriving. Not exploding, not viral famous. Just steady. Good. She'd taken on 6 of the 12 referrals from Michaela Chen, turned down 4 others because they didn't align with her vision, started being selective in a way she'd never allowed herself before. Marcus had hired 2 additional assistants. They'd moved into a small office space in Birmingham, nothing fancy but professional. Zoraya had started teaching workshops on event design for women entrepreneurs. She'd been featured in Southern Bride magazine twice, once in Diane's original article, once in a follow-up piece about resilience and reinvention. People still recognized her sometimes, still brought up the wedding incident or the Junho connection. But the sting had faded. She'd learned to say, that was a complicated time, and leave it at that. She was sitting in her office late one Thursday evening, finishing a proposal, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered it anyway. Zoraya Vale. Ms. Vale, this is Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. Zoraya's blood ran cold. I have a lawyer. I'm not calling about you. I'm calling about Junho Kang. I haven't spoken to him in 3 months. I know. That's actually why I'm calling. The agent's voice was professional, but not unkind. We've been building a case against Kang's organization for 2 years. We had planned to bring charges next month. Okay. He's offered to cooperate, to provide information in exchange for immunity for certain parties. Zoraya's hand tightened on the phone. Why are you telling me this? Because you're one of the parties he negotiated immunity for, along with several other civilians who had peripheral contact with his operations. Agent Chen paused. He was very specific about making sure you wouldn't face any legal consequences for your association with him. I didn't do anything illegal. We know. But in cases like this, proximity can be damaging. Kang wanted to make sure that wasn't a problem for you. After they hung up, Zoraya sat in her quiet office and cried. Not because she wanted Junho back, not because she regretted her choice, but because even in the wreckage of everything, he'd kept his word. He'd protected her. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to the number she'd never deleted. Thank you. The response came hours later, just 3 words. You were worth it. Zoraya deleted the message thread, blocked the number, and let herself grieve for something that had never really been hers to begin with. 6 months after that, Zoraya was approached by a production company interested in turning her story into a documentary about women rebuilding after public failure. She said no at first. Then she thought about all the women who'd reached out to her over the past year, women who'd been humiliated by ex-partners, women who'd lost businesses, women who'd been shamed for standing up for themselves. She said yes on the condition that the focus was on resilience, not revenge. The documentary premiered at a film festival in Atlanta. Zoraya attended with Marcus and her mother, all of them dressed up and nervous. Darnell wasn't mentioned by name. Junho appeared only as a complicated relationship that taught me about boundaries and self-worth. The focus was on Zoraya's work, her artistry, her journey from broken to building to something resembling whole. When the lights came up, the audience gave her a standing ovation. Afterward, a young woman approached her in the lobby. She was maybe 25, black, with nervous hands and determined eyes. Thank you, the woman said. My ex-husband tried to destroy my business last year. Everyone told me to just move on quietly. But watching your story made me realize I don't have to disappear to survive. Zoraya pulled her into a hug. You never have to disappear. You just have to keep showing up. The woman cried on her shoulder, and Zoraya held her and thought about all the versions of herself she'd been. The wife, the divorcee, the scandal, the survivor. She was still all of those things, but she was also something else now. She was free. A year and a half after the Ashford Chen wedding, Zoraya stood in another venue setting up for another event. This one was smaller, more intimate. A vow renewal for a couple celebrating 30 years of marriage. The wife had survived cancer. The husband had survived losing his business. They'd weathered everything together and wanted to mark it. Zarya had designed the event around the theme of endurance. Not perfection, not fairy tales, just the simple, profound beauty of choosing each other again and again. She was adjusting the final centerpiece when her phone buzzed. A text from Diane Rothman. Turn on Channel 7. Zoraya pulled up the local news on her phone. The headline read, Korean businessman Junho Kang sentenced to 5 years federal prison in plea deal. The footage showed Junho in a suit, handcuffed, being led into a courthouse. His face was expressionless. His shoulders were straight. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd made his choices and was paying for them. Zoraya watched until the segment ended. Then she put her phone away and went back to work. She didn't cry, didn't call anyone, didn't post about it on social media. She just acknowledged it, the same way she acknowledged rain or traffic or any other fact of life that couldn't be changed. That night, after the vow renewal ended in tears and champagne, and two people choosing each other all over again, Zariah drove home to her apartment. She poured herself a glass of wine, put on music, stood at her window looking out at the Birmingham skyline. She thought about Darnell, wherever he was, hopefully learning to be a better man. She thought about Junho in a prison cell, paying for choices she'd never fully understand. She thought about herself. 39 years old, single, successful, scared, brave, broken, healing, all of it at once. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt something close to peace. Not because everything had worked out perfectly, not because she'd gotten revenge or vindication or any kind of Hollywood ending, but because she'd survived. She'd built something real from the wreckage. She'd learned that she could be hurt and still choose to get back up. She'd learned that her worth wasn't determined by who loved her or who left her or who tried to destroy her. It was determined by her, every single day, every choice to keep going. The next morning, Zariah woke up to an email from a bride in North Carolina who wanted to hire her for a destination wedding in the mountains. She read through the details, made notes, started sketching ideas, and then she got to work. Because that's what survivors did. They kept building, kept creating, kept showing up. One imperfect, beautiful day at a time.